This recording is one of a series that provides further guidance on the assessments for the units of the Associate Diploma. My name is Nikki Small, and this recording focuses on 5C001, Organisational Performance and Culture in Practice. Assessments are revised on a regular basis, and this guidance is based on the June 2025 version. The last moderation window for this assessment is September 2026. This assessment contains 12 questions that assess 12 assessment criteria, also referred to as ACs. The overall word count for the assessment for this unit is 4,550 plus or minus 10%. Therefore, the maximum word count for this assessment is 5,005 words. Any assessments that exceed 5,005 words will be rejected for marking, returned to you, and counted as a refer. You will then be allowed to resubmit your assessment in line with the CIPD referral policy. To ensure full coverage of all ACs, this means approximately 380 words can be allocated to answering each AC. It is essential to read the case study before answering any of the assessment questions. All questions directly relate to the case study. Each answer that you write must directly address the question set, taking into consideration information provided about Calmere House and Chaffinch Group. Your response to this assessment should be submitted in a Word document. This assessment does not require a particular format, such as a report or briefing paper, but each question and related AC reference should be presented along with the answer to the question as shown on the right. It is only the answers to the questions that are included in the word count for this assessment. Question 1. Evaluate the extent to which the flat, non-hierarchical structure was appropriate under Kirsten's ownership and the extent to which the hierarchical bureaucratic structure is suitable under Chaffinch Group's ownership. It is important to answer the question set, so you should focus on flat non-hierarchical structures and hierarchical bureaucratic structures. If you write about different structures, your answer cannot pass. You should take each structure in turn and briefly explain the structure, then evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of that structure, taking into consideration the differences in ownership. You should resist the temptation to simply identify advantages and disadvantages, as this is not an evaluation. In particular, you should not present a list of advantages and disadvantages in a table format. To evaluate, you should make an appraisal of the value or not of the advantages and disadvantages, considering the validity, reliability, and applicability of the advantages and disadvantages. Question 2. Analyse how Chaffinch Group could use a rational approach to strategy formulation to ensure that services provided meet customer needs. To analyse, you should break the topic down into separate parts and examine each part with thoughts and judgments, and show how the main ideas are related and why they are important. Before you can answer this question, you should check that you understand the rational approach to strategy formulation, that you have identified Chaffinch Group's customers from the information provided in the case study, and that you have identified what services are provided from information provided to you in the case study. Once you are clear on these points, you can start to develop your answer. Question 3. Analyse one external factor that is currently having a negative impact on the residential care industry and one external factor that is currently having a positive impact on the residential care industry. This question focuses on external factors and the impact of these. You should start by deciding which external factors to focus on. It is important to focus on external factors rather than internal factors. To help you identify relevant external factors, you could undertake a BSL analysis. Then you could select the 2 factors that you want to write about. If you take this approach, you should not include the whole BSL analysis in your work. You should analyse each external factor separately. For example, if you choose to write about the shortage of qualified staff in the sector having a negative impact, you could support this assertion with a reference to show how you know this is the case. You could show knowledge of why there is a shortage of qualified staff as part of your analysis, whether this shortage is a long-term or short-term issue, and how the shortage impacts organisations such as Chaffinch Group. A similar approach can then be taken with the other external factor that you choose to include in your answer. Question 4. Under Kirsten's ownership of Calmere House, there was little investment in technology. Chaffinch Group want to change this approach and have decided to implement technology to deliver better patient care and employee experience. Assess how technology could be used by Chaffinch Group and how this would impact work at Calmere House. The command verb in this question is assess. To assess, you should evaluate or judge the importance of an issue and use available information to make a reasoned judgment. In assessing how technology could be used by Chaffinch Group, you could consider categories of technology. For example, technology used for communication, for information. It is important to address the second part of the question too, by assessing how your examples could impact work at Chaffinch House. Question 5. Using theories and models which examine organisation and human behaviour, explain why problems have arisen following the takeover of Calmere House by Chaffinch Group. When answering question 5, you should start by identifying the problems that have arisen following the takeover of Calmere House by Chaffinch Group. You can then decide which theories or models to select that explain why these problems may have occurred. It is up to you to decide how many to include, but 2 or 3 should be sufficient to show both breadth and depth of knowledge and understanding in your answer. For example, you could choose Shine's culture model when writing about organisational behaviour and Rock's scarf theory when writing about human behaviour. It is not enough to explain your chosen model and/or theory. You need to apply your knowledge and understanding of the models and theories to explain the problems that have arisen following the takeover of Calmere House by Chaffinch Group. There are many websites that provide explanations of relevant theories and models, but it is important to read and reference credible sources in your answer. Question 6. Assess how changes to selection and employee voice have impacted organisational culture and behaviours at Chaffinch Group. Question 6 focuses on how people practices impact on organisational culture and behaviour, and specifically on the changes to selection and employee voice that you have studied. Therefore, you need to be clear how approaches to selection have changed and how approaches to voice have changed. When assessing, you could explore whether there have been positive and/or negative impacts resulting from the changes and how important these impacts are. Question 7. Explain how Chaffinch Group could have better managed the change from a small owner-managed care home to Calmere House being part of a large organisation. We now move from culture to change. In question 7, you need to explain how Chaffinch Group could have better managed the change. You could draw on your knowledge of models of change management, but it is not enough to describe or explain a model. You need to apply knowledge to answer the question. There are plenty of models to choose from. For example, Cotter, Lewin, Adkar. Whichever model you choose to include in your answer, the focus is on how change could have been managed better. It is important to include a reference or references to show where you read about the model or models in your answer. A good starting place for wider reading is Change Management, a Guide for People Professionals, written by Angela Roberts and Helen Tracy. This guide was written by Roberts and Tracy in 2024 and is available on the CIPD's website. Question 8. Explain the experience of change for the employees of Calmere House and examine how this is reflected through the stages of one model. Question 8 requires you to explain how change is experienced. Rather than merely explaining a relevant model, such as Bridges' transition model or Kubler-Ross change curve, you need to apply your knowledge and understanding of the model to explain how employees of Calmere House experienced change when the business was taken over by Chaffinch Group. It's essential that wider reading from credible sources informs your answer. Many websites include information on models that could be included in this answer, but not all are credible and reliable. Question 9. Assess 2 factors that could impact employee well-being at Calmere House, including why it is important that these factors are addressed. When answering this question, you need to assess. When assessing, you should evaluate or judge the importance of an issue and use available information to make a reasoned judgment. Here, the focus is on well-being. So you should evaluate or judge 2 factors that could impact well-being at Calmere House. You can choose any 2 relevant factors to include in your answer, but must draw on information provided to you in the case study. You could consider the importance of well-being from both the employer and employee perspective. Impacts could include impacts on engagement, motivation, job satisfaction, etc. Question 10. Discuss how the people manager, recruitment advisor, and employment relations case advisor could support the retention stage of the employee life cycle. This question focuses on the retention stage of the employee life cycle, so you should avoid a lengthy discussion of the whole employee life cycle. You should consider each role in turn to ensure each role is sufficiently covered in your answer and ensure that you draw on the issues in the case study. So how could the people manager support retention? How could the recruitment advisor support retention? How could the employment relations case advisor support retention? Question 11. Analyse how people practices could help Chaffinch Group to fill 100% of resident rooms within 6 months. Question 11 assesses your ability to assess how people practices support achievement of organisational strategies. Chaffinch Group has a clear goal to fill 100% of resident rooms within 6 months. You could show knowledge of how the people strategy could be vertically aligned with the business strategy to achieve this goal. You could show knowledge of how people practices need to be mutually reinforcing to support the achievement of this goal. There is an opportunity to offer practical recommendations on a range of people practices that could support achievement of this goal. Whichever practices you analyse, the information in the case study should inform your answer. You could draw recommendations from the areas of resourcing, reward, relations, and learning and development. The final question requires you to discuss how Kath could consult and engage with employees to understand why employee turnover at Calmere House has increased. The focus of your answer should be on the processes that could be used to consult and engage with employees to gain their views and opinions on why employee turnover has increased. You should not discuss why employee turnover has increased, and you should not discuss how employee turnover could be reduced. You could write about focus groups, surveys, interviews, meetings, or any other activity where consultation and engagement could take place. To discuss, you should investigate or examine by argument and debate, giving reasons for and against the methods you have chosen to write about. Before we close, I would like to emphasise the need to apply wider reading to inform each answer and to include references to reliable sources to show evidence of this reading in each answer. We have now reached the end of the webinar. Thank you for listening. Webinars are also available for the other units of the Associate Diploma.